Following the surprise attack by Hamas, Israel received strong international support. This led the United States to become Israel's main ally and defender as a result of such aggression. Consequently, the insurgents turned their attention toward American bases and installations, provoking a series of attacks over approximately a month. This support strengthened the relationship between Israel and the United States, driving greater collaboration in security and defense. The United States has reacted firmly to these provocations, although militant groups persist in their resistance. After a series of clashes, the United States retaliated against the latest attacks directed at its troops. The events of this counteroffensive in response to the recent attacks are detailed below. Last night, the United States carried out a new series of airstrikes against facilities linked to Iran and its allies. According to official reports, fatalities and injuries were recorded as a result of these attacks. These strikes appear to have represented an escalation by the Biden administration, which had already carried out 2 previous rounds of strikes intended to deter Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and militant groups backed by them in Syria and Iraq. U.S. officials said there were no reports of injuries among their troops during those attacks. The U.S. Air Force carried out the strikes using F-15E aircraft against several buildings, including training centers and ammunition depots in Abu Kamal, as well as a residence used as an operations center in Mayadeen. This recent aggression took place just 4 days after another attack by U.S. warplanes against an ammunition depot in eastern Syria. In addition, another retaliatory action by the United States was carried out 2 days ago. These events have caused great shock and commotion among Syrian militants. U.S. officials blame Iran and its militant groups for a steady series of daily rocket and drone attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. However, in recent weeks, President Biden has chosen to reject more aggressive bombing options proposed by the Pentagon, expressing concern about avoiding triggering a broader conflict with Iran. Republican critics in Congress, along with air power advocates, have expressed concern, arguing that the White House's limited response could lead to an escalation of more frequent and dangerous attacks on U.S. troops in the region. Despite this, the Pentagon and other Biden administration officials have disputed these criticisms, emphasizing that the purpose of the recent U.S. airstrikes was to disrupt militant activity and protect the safety of personnel rather than simply attack ammunition or buildings. During his trip, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin emphasized, "The President's top priority is the safety of American personnel." At the same time, the President has supported the action taken to make clear that the United States will defend itself and protect its personnel along with its interests. At a news conference in Seoul, Austin reiterated the United States' commitment to doing whatever is necessary to safeguard its troops. Pentagon officials reported that there were fewer than a dozen Iranian-backed militants in the areas bombed last night, and it is likely that some of them were hit by the attack, wounded, or killed. However, American analysts were unable to offer a more precise estimate of the number of victims. The Pentagon reported that in recent weeks there have been around 48 attacks targeting U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria, wounding a total of 56 U.S. soldiers, according to the statement issued today. About half of them suffered brain injuries as a result of these attacks, and 2 of the soldiers had to be transferred to Landstuhl Military Hospital in Germany for medical care. The United States maintains a presence of 2,000 troops in Iraq and Syria, primarily to support local forces in the fight against the remnants of the Islamic State. Faced with the unexpected attack by Hamas on Israel, the United States is modifying its military deployment in the Middle East with the aim of preventing a regional conflict that could involve American forces in clashes with Iranian proxies present in Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. The United States has deployed 1 aircraft carrier to the eastern Mediterranean near Israel, while another has just departed the Red Sea for the Arabian Sea off Oman. Additionally, the Pentagon has sent dozens of additional fighter jets to the Persian Gulf region, as well as supplemental Patriot missile defense batteries and other defense systems to several Gulf states to protect U.S. troops and bases in the region. So far, these air defense systems have been successful in countering threats against U.S. military personnel, although U.S. military officials have claimed that troops have been lucky not to suffer fatal casualties. Dana Stroul, the Pentagon's top Middle East policy official, told a congressional hearing, "It is clear that Iran and its allied groups are escalating attacks against U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria, and we have a number of options to defend ourselves." Following these attacks, Iranian leaders have issued statements. They warn that the world is on the brink of a regional conflict in the Middle East and accuse Israel of having crossed critical lines. President Ibrahim Raisi mentioned that this situation could lead to joint action. However, Iran is treading carefully, blurring its critical lines to avoid falling into a trap and trying to avoid a direct confrontation. Instead, Iran relies on its indirect allies in the region to launch limited attacks against Israel and U.S. military bases in Iraq and Syria, forming part of its axis of resistance. Support for forces such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza has been a key feature of Iranian foreign policy. By supporting these forces, Iran maintains that they act independently, although the level of autonomy that these resistance forces actually have with respect to Iran remains unknown. Emil Hokayyam of the International Institute for Strategic Studies has spent time analyzing the relationship between Iran and its proxies. Hokayyam recently stated, "This debate will continue indefinitely, but we have gained valuable information about the dynamics between Iran and its network of partners. It empowers them, it supports them, it guides them, but it rarely gives orders." Westerners have difficulty conceptualizing these chains of command. Iran's allies are like young comrades in arms, reliable but not dependent. Even Hezbollah does not expect direct and constant assistance from Iran during a conflict. These allies of Iran make their own decisions and seek Iran's consent. Although they are not expected to do anything against Iran's interests, they have a wide margin of action. After all these statements, another question arises. To what extent is Hamas dependent on Iran? Hamas has its roots in the Muslim Brotherhood, a Sunni Muslim group, which has limited relations with Iran in the past. During the war in Syria in 2011, for example, relations became even more strained. In the Gaza conflict in 2012, Hamas launched long-range FER-5 rockets of Iranian origin against cities such as Aviv and Jerusalem. Following the Gaza crisis in 2021, Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas, praised Iran for allowing intense bombing. Haniyeh noted Tehran's contribution in terms of money, weapons, and technical support. Hamas claimed that a general in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iran's main military branch, had trained and advised them. Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, accused Iran of providing 90% of Hamas funding. And despite suspicions about Iranian involvement in the attacks on Israel a month ago, the United States has maintained its refusal to have intelligence to support this claim. Some reports indicated that the attacks were planned in regular meetings in Beirut, with the presence of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran's Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdollahian. However, Iran announced the minister's visit to Beirut, and it is unlikely that Iranian news agencies will publicize a meeting where an attack on Israel was discussed. Thanks for your attention.